Hey, everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. Every single day, massive institutions are making gigantic decisions that affect our lives, our money, and our health, and they're doing it using data that is fundamentally broken. I know, we all just kind of assume the info driving our modern world is rock solid, right? But if you look closely, the very ground beneath our data is literally giving way. Today, we're unpacking a really vital concept called the architecture of traceable trust. Put simply, this is the idea that information is only as reliable as our ability to prove exactly where it came from and who touched it along the way. Right now, that traceability is totally missing from almost every major sector of society, and it's creating a massive structural vulnerability. So, we're going to look at why these critical systems keep breaking down, the real-world consequences, and most importantly, the fascinating tech shift that's finally letting us rebuild things on a foundation of absolute certainty.
Okay, think back to a major financial collapse, like the cascading bank failures we saw in 2008, or even more recent institutional meltdowns. When a huge bank suddenly fails overnight, the very next day we predictably see headlines blaming unexpected losses. It's a phrase carefully spun to sound like bad weather, just a sudden storm no financial meteorologist could have possibly foreseen. But it's rarely just bad luck. What's actually happening here is a massive failure of data provenance. Think about a standard mortgage. Its risk profile gets packaged, repackaged, sold, and shoved into some wildly complex financial instrument. By the time that asset hits the final buyer's ledger, the foundational data, the actual risk involved, is completely obscured. The institution literally has no idea what the original data actually meant. They are flying blind, which is exactly why the losses seem so unexpected.
And we see this exact same phenomenon over in the corporate world too. Whenever a massive scandal breaks inside a Fortune 500 company, the official PR spin is almost always brushed off with this incredibly sterile phrase, accounting irregularities. It makes it sound like, a tired intern just misplaced a decimal point on a spreadsheet. But let's trace how this actually happens structurally. A regional branch creates a financial file. That file gets emailed, reformatted, and merged into a larger database. Then, that data gets extracted and rolled into a global quarterly report. Somewhere in those countless handoffs, critical context tags, formulas, or original source citations just get dropped. Poof, gone. So the final executive making the big call is looking at a number completely stripped of its history. They have absolutely no way to verify if the data was altered along the chain, whether accidentally or maliciously.
Tragically, the stakes get even higher when we look at healthcare. When a hospital patient gets the wrong diagnosis or they're given a medication that causes a severe reaction, the system almost entirely places the blame on the idea that critical information was incomplete. The system just shrugs and points to a missing file or a dropped communication line. Imagine a patient's severe allergy info is logged in a primary care clinic's database. When that patient transfers to a specialist and then ultimately to an operating table, their data has to cross through several completely disconnected healthcare systems. If that specific allergy tag fails to properly translate into the surgical database, well, the surgeon is operating with deadly blind spots. The data didn't just disappear. The system fundamentally failed to carry the critical history of that patient's health record right to the point of care.
Now, what's really interesting here is the revelation that despite happening in completely different sectors, this is the exact same failure. Finance, corporate governance, healthcare. On the surface, a bank collapse, corporate fraud, and a medical misdiagnosis look like completely isolated problems, right? We even treat them as unique crises that need totally different regulations. But underneath it all, they share the exact same root cause: systemic data degradation. Whether it's a toxic financial asset, a cooked revenue spreadsheet, or a missing medical chart, our underlying infrastructure just cannot guarantee the integrity of information as it moves. We've built these incredibly fast highways for sharing data, but we completely forgot to build a way to ensure the cargo hasn't been tampered with or lost by the time it arrives at its destination.
So the crucial point is that this isn't just random human error. The excuse we're constantly handed for these catastrophic breakdowns is, oh, somebody typed the wrong number or somebody forgot an email. But the real culprit is a profound structural flaw. Somewhere in the chain, the data completely lost its origin. You see, our legacy data systems, the software running the world right now, were designed decades ago to do one thing: transfer values. They are fantastic at moving a number from point A to point B. What they aren't designed to do is transfer provenance. Provenance is just the verifiable history of that data: who typed it, when, under what authority, and has it been changed. Because our systems are basically blind to provenance, information gets passed around, and the record of where it actually came from just vanishes. The structural flaw is that our digital infrastructure actively strips away the history of the data it carries.
And we are looking at a massive, almost incomprehensible scale of risk here.
Modern institutions are making billion-dollar decisions, massive choices that dictate the flow of the global economy and our personal safety, using information they simply cannot trace back to the start. Think about it like trying to build a massive 100-story skyscraper, but you have absolutely no idea where the steel came from. No manifest for its structural integrity, no record of who tested it, no proof of its load-bearing capacity. You would never build a physical structure that way, right? It would literally be considered criminally negligent. Yet, that is exactly what our modern institutions are doing with data. Algorithms and policies are operating without a manifest, building enormous digital structures on completely unverified materials.
We keep acting completely shocked when these systems fail. Every time a market dips or a data error causes real-world harm, there's all this public outcry and surprise, but this brilliantly illustrates that collapse is the inevitable result of relying on invisible foundations. It's not a glitch, it's not an anomaly, it is the mathematical certainty of building complex, high-stakes systems on data that lacks provenance. You're essentially just waiting for the moment a critical piece of info turns out to be false or missing. The invisible rot at the base of our institutional data pretty much guarantees that the structures built on top of it are eventually going to give way. Section 2. Building trust on proof. Let's move to the architectural solution and see how we can actually fix this foundational rot across all these industries. We can't just cross our fingers and mandate fewer human errors. We have to transition from trusting blind data to building trust on verifiable proof. And that brings us to a revolutionary solution called Codatta. Codatta is stepping in to build a totally new kind of foundation, one where every single piece of data inherently carries its entire history right along with it. How does this actually work, technically? Well, instead of just sending a raw value, like a name or a dollar amount, across a network, Codatta uses cryptographic proofs and advanced decentralized ledger tech to wrap every piece of data in an unalterable digital passport. From the exact millisecond it's created, the data is cryptographically signed. Every time it's viewed, merged, or transferred, a permanent, mathematically verifiable stamp gets added to its ledger. So the data doesn't just show up on your desk, it arrives with an unbreakable, mathematically proven record of exactly where it's been and who interacted with it. This radically shifts the whole paradigm. It replaces a fragile system built on blind assumptions with absolute traceable proof. Under the old foundation, trust was based purely on assumption. You just kind of assumed the spreadsheet was accurate because it came from the finance director's email, or you assumed the medical chart was complete because it was in the official system. The Codatta Foundation replaces that with proof. Going back to that hospital surgeon we talked about earlier, under this new architecture, they wouldn't just get a patient file and hope for the best. They would receive cryptographic proof of exactly who entered the allergy data, when it was entered, and absolute certainty that nothing was dropped in transit between clinics. You don't have to assume anything anymore, because the verifiable truth is baked directly into the data itself.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this vital question to ask yourself. What invisible foundations are your decisions built on? Think about the metrics you rely on for your business, the financial numbers you trust for your future, or even the news you're consuming today. Because once you understand the architecture of traceable trust, you realize that accepting data without provenance is essentially flying blind. Demanding cryptographic verifiable proof isn't just some nice-to-have technical feature for the future. It's literally the only way to prevent the inevitable collapse of the systems we rely on every single day. Thanks for exploring this architecture with me today.